Hey, it's just great to be with you here today, and I just want to share something with you that's been a real help to me through this pandemic season that we've all been through in 2020. There are two events in the life of Jesus' disciples that really have spoken to me. They're both in Luke chapter 6, and the first one is the feeding of the 5,000. It's quite a well-known story, and you would remember if you've read that scripture that it got late in the day. Jesus asked his disciples to feed the people. They said, well, we haven't got anything. We got five loaves and 2 fish. Jesus gave thanks and told them to sit the people down and distribute it to them, and they fed the entire 5,000. Now, in those days, the 5,000 was just the men, so there could well have been 20,000 people there on that day if you count women and children as well as the men. So they all got fed. There were 12 baskets of scraps left over. It's just an absolutely astonishing miracle. And then it goes on and says, immediately Jesus told his disciples to get into the boat. So it's now getting dark, and the disciples get in the boat, out to sea they go, and this terrible storm blew up, and they were deeply afraid. In verse 46 of Mark 6 it says, and he saw they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. So they went from one impossible situation to another. Next thing, Jesus walks out to them on the water, another miracle, and calms them down and calms the sea down. And then there's this very interesting verse 52. It says, for they did not understand about the loaves. They didn't understand about the loaves. So these two events happened in quick succession, one after the other. They're both impossible situations. The first one didn't create fear, but the second one certainly did. And it says they did not understand about the loaves. So what is there to understand? It's just simply this. They should have understood that when Jesus fed all those thousands of people with miraculous supply of food, it just has this lesson for all of us, that it doesn't matter what happens, he loves us and he will take care of us. So the challenge, I think, for all of us, and particularly for me, is what is the default position when something comes against us, when we're facing adversity or some calamity or some struggle, something that's going wrong. And we've all had to work our way through the coronavirus pandemic through this year. It's affected everybody all around the world. It's been quite astonishing, really. And so when something comes up against us that perhaps causes us fear and pain, what's the default? What do we do? What do we think? What do we feel? And the message I got out of this is that what I should be doing, what I need to feel, is not to worry, but to trust that Jesus is going to take care of me. He will calm the sea. He will stop the wind. He will come to us. He will join us in the boat and take care of us. So there's nothing really to worry about. Even though everything around us might look black and gloomy and impossible, he's the God of the possible. And the default needs to be, and for me I'm learning this, not to worry, not to panic, but to trust in Jesus. He will take care of me. Now this is illustrated over and over again in the life of the early Israelites. Their default position when things went wrong for them was to abandon the journey and go back to Egypt. It's quite remarkable when you read their story of being delivered out of the hand of Pharaoh and going through the Red Sea and into the Promised Land. Things went wrong for them all the time. They ran out of food, they ran out of water, and the default was to whinge and complain and to speak ill against their leaders. And the cry was, let's go back to what we used to be in. Let's go back to Egypt. And Egypt was the place, however, it was more pain back there. They were slaves. They were in bondage. Terrible life. And yet they hankered after the old things because they didn't have enough faith to go into the new. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 8 to 12, there's a clear instruction that God gives his people to move into the Promised Land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And he tells them that in the Promised Land, it's not like the land of Egypt. Back in Egypt, he says, you'll remember that you sowed your seed and then you irrigated the seed to make it grow. In the old King James Bible, it says you watered it with your foot, which is a pretty graphic picture. And what he's saying there is, back in Egypt, you planted your seed, the only way to make it grow, you had to work at it. You had to pump it up with your foot. You had to put out a lot of energy and sweat and with your own labour. But he said, in the promised land, you won't have to do that because it rains. Now, rain is under God's control. Not anything we can't make it rain. And so in the promised land, yes, they still have to sow their seed and do their work, but the trust is now going to be in God, who will supply the rain. So the challenge is, let's not go back to Egypt. Let's not hanker after the old ways we used to do things. Let's not do life in our own strength and with our own cleverness and our own schemes and plans, but let us trust in the Lord. I hope that's a blessing to you today. It's really been a blessing to me, and it's helped me enormously to get through this year. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and God bless. And don't forget to ring your friends and encourage them to have faith in Jesus. He will take care of all of us. Thank you.